Ann Tutwiler. I am recently stepped down in the early 2019 as the Director General of Biodiversity International, one of the CGIAR research centers, focusing on how we use agricultural biodiversity to address the challenges of climate change, environment, and nutrition and livelihoods. And that's where I got to know the World Farmers Organization and Arianna and company quite closely. Prior to that, I was the Deputy Director General for Knowledge at FAO, so responsible for coordinating the work of all the technical divisions, so across the Food and Agriculture Organization, and spent a long time working both in industry, nonprofit, and the US government sector. So come to this discussion with a lot of interest and enthusiasm. So while we're waiting, while we have a few minutes and people are coming into the room, sometimes we find it nice to do a little quick chat box warm up, and we can do that while we're waiting for a couple more minutes for folks to arrive. So, you know, we all talk about sustainable livestock as if we sort of encode as if we know what that means. And what I want to ask the participants to do is to basically put in the chat anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 words just describing sustainable livestock without using either of those 2 words. So without using the word sustainable and without using the word livestock. And just think about it for 30 seconds and pop your thoughts into the chat. That would be great. Great. All right, thank you so much. And please keep going. This is great to see. Circular economy is one of my favorites there. So to give a quick introduction and overview, I think this is such an important issue, and it is an issue that we cannot avoid discussing. Right? For me, if we cannot find a solution through this issue of sustainable livestock in this UN Food System Summit, we will have not succeeded at one of the most important objectives that we have. We know that livestock plays a tremendous role in climate change and can in contributing to climate change, but also can play a tremendous role, as you will hear from some of our farmers here on this panel, in mitigating climate change. Livestock can also be part of the circular economy, as was mentioned in the chat, and it has a role to play in improving its environmental footprint. It's critical to food security, it's critical to nutrition security, and I think, you know, one of the things that often gets missed, it's very critical to gender, and I think it's wonderful we have so many women farmers here, but we also know in Africa, livestock and developing world livestock is critical to their livelihoods, to their income, and in many cases to a family's wealth. So I think this is absolutely a critical discussion, and I really want to applaud WFO for bringing this to the attention of the UN Food System Summit, because like I said, we cannot avoid this discussion, and we need to find pathways to move forward to address and improve And I think today, in the context of these remarks from farmers, we will find some solutions. So Arianna, over to you. I think you're so well known to this audience. Arianna's been the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization since 2017. She and I have known each other since then. 10 years before that, she was representing the interests, working for the Italian Farmers Association. So Arianna, over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Before we start, let me welcome everybody. Welcome to this session. Let me first of all wish a very good and prompt recovery to the WFO president, Theo de Jager. He would have never wanted to miss this session, which he cherishes because he has been personally committing a lot to promote sustainable livestock as a fundamental and pivotal way forward for food systems. So Theo is not doing well at the moment, but he's recovering, and it's important that we send him all of our greetings and best wishes. Coming to the point, WFO commitment to promote sustainable food systems has been strong, relentless, and clear since the very beginning of any conversation on this topic. We have been working with all of our members that have decided to embrace a position already back in June 2020 about what sustainable food systems mean for those who produce food. And our recipe for sustainable food systems is clear. Food systems must be inclusive. The no one left behind conversation is full of meaning to us. Food systems must be farmer-driven, solutions-based, and science-rooted. So these are the principles that are moving us in whatever we do. And when it comes to livestock, taking into account these principles, the inclusion, the farmer-driven approach, the science importance, and the fact that we must anchor everything we do into pragmatic solutions, there is no doubt livestock is a fundamental pillar and must keep on being one of the pillars of sustainable food systems in the future. The millennial history of livestock is now confronted with many challenges. Farmers are here to say that we can surely and even improve. There's always space to do better. This is what farmers do every day, being innovators by nature. But there's no question and no doubt, livestock is a fundamental component of our diets. It's a fundamental component of who we are as rural communities all across the globe. I do not have to spend too much words. The intent of WFO with this session is to let the farmers' voices be heard through their stories. And I want to thank all the producers that have accepted to spend time with us and to match these with science. That's why Professor Ederer, representing the WFO Scientific Council, is here. So I'm wishing all of the participants a good conversation, and first to listen to exciting stories, and then don't hesitate to raise all the difficult questions because farmers are here to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arianna. As Arianna said, we are the Q&A and the chat are open. We do encourage people to send any questions to the address that I think one of my colleagues has put into the chat, which can be then conveyed to the individual speakers if we don't have time to get to Q&A in live chat now. So Per, over to you. As Arianna just said, you're a member of the Scientific Council of the World Farmers Organization, and I take it this is a new entity within WFO, and is something that you told me yesterday you were very proud to having been behind and pushed. So over to you to talk about some of the scientific work that WFO has been doing on this issue.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you Arianna for setting the stage here. Yes, so we have been a scientific council at the World Farmers Organization for the past 1 year. And we have created a number of different items, but our most important function has been to accompany World Farmers Organization during the Food System Summit and give provide their scientific angles and perspectives and argumentation. We have in particular also led the issue on sustainable livestock and try to distill what we call a foundation paper or the strategic direction of what is the possibility, where are the levers of change, where's the pathways, how we can secure the future of livestock in a sustainable way, in a nutritious way, in an economically viable way. During these efforts over the last couple of months, I want to highlight here what we created, a 2-page paper. It's a foundation document for further discussion, and I will summarize it to you here, what we put together in this 2 pages. Essentially, we're saying that there's 4 levers of change, 4 levers of improvement that can help us secure the future of livestock in the global food system. And I will briefly go through each 4 of them. The first one is, let us utilize the full diversity that is available in livestock. We have something like 40 different breeds, 40 different species, not breeds, 40 different species that we can use to help serve humanity. And we're not making full use of those 40 different species. And within the species, we probably have something like 7,000 different breeds that can be used to utilize almost any ecological niche that we have in the world, from literally deserts up to polar circles. So if we use that diversity of genetics, of breeds, of species, of different production systems, from extensive to intensive, from smallholder to big company, there's so much diversity in this system. Let's use this diversity to develop solutions. And then what do we want to develop solutions for? The second lever is innovation. We can accelerate the innovation that is already out there. There's so much fantastic technological and business model solutions already in practice. We don't have to wait for R&D to come up with the next new thing. There's amazing technology already in the field, and we need to scale these technologies to adopt broader practice. So these innovations, they come in the fields of technologies, of genomics, of data science, artificial intelligence, robotics, precision livestock farming. There are so many different fields of technologies that can promote this. But we're not talking about technology innovation only. We're also talking about business model innovation. We're talking about different models, how the private and the public sector should work together. We're talking about different ways in which producers and consumers interact with each other and share information with each other. There is a wealth of information, there is a wealth of best practice already happening, and we need to build on that wealth and bring it out into the practice. So that brings me then to the third lever. So the first one is diversity, the second is innovation, the third one is improving the accounting systems. Now that may sound not very glorious, but we believe that it's really fundamental. We need to improve the way in which we measure our performance, both economically and socially and environmentally, so that for the impacts that we have on our socio and ecological systems, that these impacts are properly measured. Because you cannot manage anything that you don't measure. And there is another very important aspect to this. If we properly manage and measure it, then we can also secure better means of financing it. Many of these innovations require financing, they require investments. And investments, investments need proper decision basis to be made. And without better accounting systems for the impacts that our systems have, we struggle to provide the capital that is necessary to make these investments. Farming is a business, and it needs proper finance, and it needs to create returns on investments. And our accounting systems are currently not sufficiently developed to justify these investments. And all three of these together then should culminate in a fourth lever of change, which is national strategies and or bio-regional strategies. There is no one-size-fits-all solution that we can drape over the whole world and then we have everything done. The very richness of diversity that we have, the very breadth and depth of innovation possibilities that we have, dictates that we need to create strategies on a national level. And if the country is too big, then maybe even on a bio-regional level, we need to create strategic roadmaps where the stakeholders have agreed for a long-term dependable decision-making basis. Many of these investments, many of these strategies that the farmers need to adopt require stability, not just for 2 years, not just for 5 years, it requires stability for 10, 15, 20 years, because these are the investment cycles that we need to deal with. And you can only create such a solid stability for your investments if there is a well understood and solidly backed up by a national consensus backed up strategy for the public, for the politics, for the consumer base, for the stakeholder base, to understand what they want their local livestock sector to represent. We urgently need these national strategic roadmaps in order to create the dependability, in order to be able to make the investments. And so that we can also understand as farmers, to which targets do we have to develop our production systems? So these are the 4 levers that we have identified and that we are pushing for within the Food System Summit. These are the 4 levers of change, the 4 arenas that need to happen: diversity, innovation, accounting systems, national strategies, and roadmaps. I want to very briefly highlight a typical argument is then, okay, but what about health? Are not livestock products a health issue? And we have recently at the Scientific Council made a paper on this, on the question of whether meat consumption in particular represents a health risk. We believe it does not, and I would like you to refer to the paper that we have published on the website of WFO on this health question. We do not think that there is a health risk associated with meat consumption, but we do believe there is many health benefits to be gained from all kinds of livestock, and that's not just meat consumption, but it's also dairy and egg products. The challenges that we're being given with regard to greenhouse gas emissions and with regards to biodiversity are very tough. We need to confront those challenges. We believe that with innovation and building on the diversity, we can master these challenges, but we need to have agreed upon strategies, dependable strategies, and these dependable strategies can only be created by a national consensus of all stakeholders involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pierre. We can tell that you, at some point in your life, must have been a university professor for telling us what you're going to tell us and telling us it again and concluding. So let me turn now to Cherie. Cherie Copithorne-Barnes is going to be putting up her PowerPoint while I'm introducing her. She is a 5th generation sustainable beef rancher in Alberta, Canada, with 1,500 head of cattle on 26,000 acres. And I know for many of you that's so difficult to even imagine what that is, but probably, you know, a normal size farm in that part of Alberta. She is the chair and founding member of the Roundtable on Sustainable Beef. And because their farm is located so close to Calgary, one of the major urban centers in Canada, pays a lot of attention to what consumers think of the meat that she's raising, and is echoing some of what Per just said. I think is concerned about also, tell us what you want, tell us what you need from us, and we'll figure out how to provide it. So Cherie, over to you.
Well, thank you. And I will pop my slides up here in just a second, but I really want to kind of introduce myself and the story of sustainable beef here in Canada a little bit before I do. It's interesting, as a 4th generation rancher and one that manages a company that's been in existence since 1887 or 134 years, a lot of folks just assumed that we would be considered a sustainable beef operation. But the reality was, just as you're all aware of, it's tough to prove it. Our stories and our traditions just simply weren't enough. And so we needed to come together and really start to understand what it was going to take to be able to communicate what it was we did in a tangible way that would allow our retail's food service partners to be able to tell our stories on our behalf. So really, this journey of sustainability started back in 2009 for me, and it really has been a journey. Fortunately, being a part of the Canadian beef industry, we learned really quickly we weren't, as cowboys, the only ones really fighting this issue, that our partners along the value chain were facing the same issues. And what this did is it created a pre-competitive conversation that allowed us to openly talk about what it was that we did at each layer of the chain, as well as being able to come together and figure out what the solution was together. And at that point, we were talking globally, because we also realized that whatever it was that we decided upon, as a beef industry as a whole, we needed to be able to start talking from the same foundation, and that was going to be critical. So that was actually the creation of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. So the first thing we did, and I'll keep talking as I start sharing my screen here, was that we knew that we had to start from we needed a starting point. We had to define what it was that really defined sustainable beef. And of course, we came up with this definition. Can you see that all? Okay, so sustainable beef is a socially responsible, environmentally sound, and economically viable product that prioritizes the planet, people, animal progress. And we did this by focusing on 5 main principles, being the natural resources, the people in the community, animal health and welfare, food, and finally, efficiency and innovation. All of these principles had to be viewed at, though, with an economic lens to them. In order to do this properly, we needed to make sure that we weren't missing any important component of this either. It was important to have everybody sitting at the table. And as this is our Canadian membership slide, the global level was very similar in its content. We needed to make sure we were not creating any unintended consequences and yet still defining beef and its production in a way that nobody could critique us for missing something as well. Now, fortunately, through the Global Roundtable in June, we've also gone right down to the level of really starting to say, as a producer, I need to know what it is that I'm aiming for. And so at the global level, we've just released our global sustainability goals. Again, it's imperative that all producers understand how and where they need to be focusing their efforts in order to contribute to achieving continuous improvement. The global goals articulate ambition, recognize reality, compel collaboration, and inspire innovation. They're not prescriptive, recognizing that each country has their own nuances and therefore allow for innovation at the national level to be able to contribute to how to deliver at the global level. In Canada, we also did just that. We have taken the Canadian beef industry and once again challenged it to deliver for 2030. In 2016, we started benchmarking the entire Canadian beef supply through the Canadian Roundtable of Sustainable Beef in order to better understand exactly where our strengths and weaknesses truly lie. Now, as a producer, I'm starting to see the targets that I need to be able to meet. And thus it makes it easier for me to choose which types of technologies or innovations that I need to be focusing on in order to not only contribute to demonstrating the improvements that I know I'm personally making, but also the improvements that we as a beef industry are achieving at the national and global levels. So back here at the ranch, I ranch in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And believe it or not, these herds have replaced the great herds of bison and wildfires that once used to coexist here. And the forests that you see are only 150 years old. The fact that these last bison left this area, they actually left in 1850, which was only 30 years prior to my great-grandfather arriving. Here in Canada, our grasslands actually end up sequestering more carbon than do our forests. And so it's through rotational grazing, improved genetics of both the cattle and introduced grass species that we're able to keep the grasslands thriving. In Canada here, the lands owned and operated by beef farmers today now house over 70% of our wildlife populations. When we manage our ecosystems correctly, both cattle and wildlife thrive and can coexist. When I have healthy elk and deer herds, the big predators of grizzlies and cougars and wolves actually end up leaving my cattle alone. The foothills of the Rocky Mountains, which stretch from Mexico clear through to Alaska, are also the headwaters for much of North America. So our riparian management is also critical. Fencing out livestock is nearly impossible. Fortunately, cattle are lazy. And therefore, generationally, we've learned where they like to access these creeks and these ponds. And so we're able to manage to ensure that we minimize the impact on these natural water flows without having to put in a lot of infrastructure. Now, it's not to say that in dry years like we're experiencing right now, that we don't use this type of a system. But with such heavy populations of deer and elk, permanent fencing is near impossible to maintain. And so we use a lot of temporary fencing that moves with the cattle to protect these areas. With the advent of solar waters, we're also able to maintain the integrity of the waterways, even when droughts like we're experiencing make it close to impossible to find water. And in conclusion, and finally, I as a beef producer can now fully explain and demonstrate how it is that I'm environmentally sound, socially responsible, and best of all, I also now have a way to improve upon my economic viability. In Canada, the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef has developed a framework that allows me to be able to sell my beef as certified sustainable. With the verification of third-party auditors, my beef can now be transferred down the chain and sold in restaurants and on supermarket shelves as certified sustainable. The creation of the sustainable beef system now allows us to clearly communicate, advance, and support continuous improvement in sustainability and become a trusted partner of a thriving feed system. With that, I'll stop sharing and turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Cherie. That was wonderful. Makes me want to get up to the Rockies and go hiking. So let me turn now to Justin Benade, who is the managing director of Ethio Chicken, which is the largest poultry and egg producer in Ethiopia. So going around the world to a completely different size distribution of farms. They are working in Ethiopia and neighboring countries to enable 8,000 micro entrepreneurs and 3 million small scale farmers in improving their poultry and egg production. And they have tripled Ethiopia's egg consumption in over just 5 years of the company history. So with that, Justin, let me turn it over to you. I've heard your story and I'm so anxious for the rest of the audience to hear it as well.
Thanks so much, Anne. Cherie, wow, great story, great countryside. So thanks for that. I've learned a lot already from you and Pierre and everyone else. So hi to everyone. No further introduction needed, I'm sure. So I'll just dive in straight for the sake of time. So what's the vision of Ethio Chicken? So Ethio Chicken's vision is making farmers healthier and wealthier. And I'll come back to that towards the end of my talk. But let me just explain to you quickly really what Ethio Chicken is and what we do. So Ethio Chicken started in 2010 up in the north of Ethiopia on a farm, and Over the following 5 years, it grew, but really with the help of investors and further help from government, it springboarded further and then spread into the rest of Ethiopia, to the point where currently we have over 1,600 employees, and the numbers have changed from what Pia has, just because of the nature of our business. Things change very quickly, but I'll explain that a little bit further later on as well. So more than 1,600 employees. We have 8 breeder farms, so parent stock of a dual purpose chicken. And those 8 breeder farms across Ethiopia have about 160,000 parent stock in production, obviously as much being reared and getting ready for production as well. Then we have 6 hatcheries, and their capacity is about 1.5 million eggs per week. And from those hatcheries, those eggs or those chicks are then obviously hatched, they're vaccinated. We're trying to give them the best possible protection before we send them out into the big wide world. These chicks are then spread via hundreds of minibuses. So windows open, trained not to stop, and if they do stop, please stop under a tree. These minibuses would then take these chicks to 9,000 agents, out of which we probably have 2,500 to 2,000 active during the low season. And these 9,000 agents are then managed by 73 area sales managers who really work very hard under very difficult conditions. They often travel vast distances to service these agents, because these agents receive these little chicks obviously as a day-old chick, a very fragile, sensitive little creature. And these agents then have to grow them to the age of 6 weeks. At 6 weeks of age, they're generally strong enough. They've had some further vaccinations administered by the agents. And from there, the agents are then responsible in some areas with more or less help from the government or from other systems that are in place. They would then sell these chickens to up to 5 million smallholder farmers that we have recorded last year. So these agents generally take about 1,200 to 1,500 chickens at a time per cycle. And for any of you who know about commercial chicken farming, it's, just finding any poultry producer that would sell you such a small number of chicks is virtually impossible in any developed country or even many developing countries. So these batches of 1,500 chickens are then, as I said, grown to 6 weeks of age, sold to these 5 million smallholder farmers. And that brought us up to 25 million chickens that we managed to sell last year and to distribute throughout Ethiopia. And it is virtually throughout Ethiopia. If you just get into a vehicle and drive any distance, you will see the chickens. And I've been experiencing that for myself for the last few years. So from these 2 to 5 chickens that the smallholder farmer, who's the end user, would buy, they can then harvest up to 200 eggs per hen and a whole lot more meat than they would normally be able to get from most other breeds, because it's a dual purpose, so it's aimed at meat and at eggs. I just need everyone to understand who these smallholder farmers are. So, there's Cherie. She's a farmer. She has 26,000 acres. I think you said, Cherie. I think an acre is close to a hectare. Where I come from, we talk about hectares. So, that in my definition is also a farmer. And farmers in many parts of the world are fairly affluent and wealthy. Even where I come from South Africa, you know, the farmers generally, you know, even if you have 10 cattle, you're rich, you're quite wealthy. So it's quite different in Ethiopia. Many times, or most of these smallholder farmers live off an acre of land, and they have a fair-sized family, and they have to, through various crops and various means, they have to make this acre of land support them throughout the entire year. And these families are really our target market. And these families are quite often where people suffer from nutritional deficiencies and where they really need support. Traditionally, they have farmed chickens. Many of them have acquired chickens in the past, and they basically just have them running around. But those chickens really did not produce much. So just to put you in the picture, I mean, that's really our end market. How did we do it? So what tools did we need? Well, obviously, if you're going to give them a chicken, you really need to give them the best chicken that's out there. And you know, Pierre, I fully support your comments on genetics there. I mean, we had to find a dual-purpose breed that is 4 times more productive than the village chicken, giving, you know, sufficient eggs. It needs to be a free-range chicken that can, you know, dodge predators and dodge rocks. And it also needs to be a scavenging chicken, because really there isn't much food. You know, it's got an acre and the surroundings to really go and find feed. In the same breath, for those little chicks, we also supply them with top quality feed from our feed mills. We have 2 feed mills supplying these operations. We need a state-of-the-art vaccination program, both at the hatchery and on farm level. And then, I mean, obviously, as we all know, without strong support from investors and very strong support from the Ethiopian government, none of this would have been possible. So those are really the key issues, or the key tools that managed to get us to where we have grown to. We've subsequently started developing an export market. The model has spread through the holding company to, they've started sister companies in Rwanda and Uganda, and they're looking at elsewhere in Africa. So, so yes, it is, it's really a success story of, you know, rather than having obviously a single owned piece of land where you then distribute these chickens to, we're basically using the whole of Ethiopia to not only grow these chickens, but also to supply them with much needed nutrition at the level where they need it, fresh out of the chicken.
Justin, I'm going to have to stop you there if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Can come back to you maybe in questions. I particularly, as in my past role as head of Biodiversity International, I love the fact that you've found the breed for this particular chicken in France, right? And been able to transfer it down to where it can really thrive in a completely different context. So thanks so much. So I'm going to turn now to Annechien ten Have, who is a Dutch pork family farmer and was named Dutch agri-entrepreneur for the year of 2019. She and her farm have 600 mother sows, 5,000 piglets, but maybe those numbers have increased as well. And I think one of the focuses of your work is still to build up your farm and to providing a good living environment. So with that, Annechien, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to share my presentation because I want to show you some pictures. Yeah. Okay, this is our farm. And well, this is a picture of my family. I farm together with my husband, Menno, and son, Detmer. And we have 3 different things on our farm. Pig farming, we are having animal farming, and we are having a biogas plant. well, this is our country in the Netherlands in Europe, and this is our farm. You have an overview from our farm, and it's completely different than what we saw in the foot of the Rocky Mountains. This is a tiny country, and it's very flat. And you see here our pig stables and also the biogas plant. Oh. I'd like to tell you something more about our farm and about the journey we made. So more than 15 years ago, I started to think seriously about how to give pigs a better life and how could I improve their lives. And so at that time, I started my journey of discovery. The first step was to look for a better life by the search for the 10 most important needs of the pigs. And the project was called Pigs in Comfort House. And this was a collaboration between the Dutch Animal Welfare Society and the Dutch Farmers Organization, LTO. But not only the 10 most important needs of the pigs were important to me, but also the question how to implement this in the housing system. How could we take research into the farm and turn theory into practice? And here, this must you must like this. But we all know a lot of things you want in life that costs money. So I thought about the way to recoup the money and at the same time create a better life for the pigs. I thought the solution was to create a market concept, but I realized that a better life for pigs is not only enough for a successful market concept. So the next step of my journey of discovery was how could I create a successful and an appealing market concept. And you all know when you eat, you want to have your food, you want to have a nice taste. And the consumer is eating, and of course they like a nice taste. But I discovered that although taste is very important for the consumer, nobody in the pork chain was working on this. There was a lack of information between the relation between a nice taste of pork and feeding the pigs, breed, or whatever. And I found it rather strange because volume was the only important USP. And that's why I started my search for a better taste of pork. And a nice taste came into the picture when I met the innovation director of the Dutch innovation platform for edible farming. He showed me an old Czech research report on lupins. And lupins gave pork a distinguished taste. And so we started a collaboration to find out all about lupins and taste. And in the meantime, I show you some pictures of my farm. But apart from animal welfare, sustainability was also an important issue for me. Lupins are a sustainable crop. Lupins do not need nitrogen, so we started to grow themselves. And suddenly we had proteins from the Netherlands, our region, and not from another continent. And then a second party, Agri-Farm, our feed company, also started to be interested in what we were doing. Local feed production for local consumption lowers the footprint. With Agri-Farm, we worked together on 2 tracks. The first track was a learning path. We attended a course called Future Farming. And as I mentioned, we tried before to combine the 10 most important needs of the pigs. And we tried to combine them with the needs of consumers, the needs of citizens, environmental needs, animal health, etc. And we developed a new housing system based on a combination of all those needs, and all those different parties and different views. And this shows how we developed our new barn, the so-called cattle stall. I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but it shows happy pigs. I give you some technical details. We have an automatic straw system, scrapers under the sweated straw, and the manure goes into our biogas. And our straws, they are in free farrowing pens. But we also focused on experiments on feed composition and different breeds. And at this time we involved a third party, and it was the best butcher of the Netherlands. He's called Jan Willem Tol. And he selected us the best pork. And then we gave it the name Hamlet's. And he made for us some very nice Hamlet sausages. With these sausages, we went to Italy, to the Salon del Gusto, a great place for the experience to taste food. A paradise for foodies, and we had a great feedback. So our brand, Hamlet's, we focus on three things: sustainability, a better life for pigs, and above all, a better taste. But we had to come with proof. We did a blind consumer survey on taste. A research institute confirmed the low CO2 footprint, and our National Animal Welfare Organization granted us with the 2 stars of the Better Life Quality Mark. You see it here on the slide. Our brand is about good taking care of our animals, give them more space, they have outdoor access, and the feed is from the region. Our pigs get grain from our fields, blueprints from our field or the region, and they also eat bread that is returned from the supermarket. That's very circular. And the manure from our pigs goes back into the biogas plant, and we deliver energy to the grids. We deliver more than 5 million kilowatt hours a year to the grid. We use our own electricity and warm. The heat, we heat our stables and houses with the heat of the biogas. So our brand, what you do has to be right. You must be transparent and accessible to the consumer. And we want to give a meaning to what we are doing. A better life for yourself, for the animal, and be good for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Having visited the Netherlands many times in my career, I'm so happy to see your farm. And next time, I hope to visit you directly. So let me turn now, if I can, to our last speaker, who is Marilyn Hershey, who is the CEO of Our Joy Farms, which is a sustainable dairy farm in Pennsylvania with 800 dairy cows, which is on the smaller size in the US. She is chair of Dairy Management, Inc. And I think she is going to focus also on the importance of animal welfare and animal health in her farm, but looking at it through the lens of a dairy producer. So Marilyn, over to you.
Thank you. And you know what? It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to talk about a couple different things. First of all, talk a little bit about the U.S. dairy industry and our net zero initiatives that we came together last year through the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy and looked at this pathway to get to net zero by 2050. We looked at this. We made some very bold goals, which after my presentation, I will put the link in the chat, and you can get to those goals directly. But we looked at them from cow to customer. So across the entire value chain, not just looking at farms, but also looking at processors and making sure that across the whole value chain, we are getting there, getting to the net zero initiative. We know it's very important to continue to provide high quality protein in a more sustainable manner to continue to nourish people and communities and our planet. As farmers, we are very concerned about the environment. You know, the planet, the soil that we farm is critical to our operations, to our dairies, and a healthy soil will give us healthy crops, and it gives us healthy feed for our cows. And so it's very important for us to have soil quality and have a healthy crop in the field to be able to give to the cows. We do milk 800 cows. We also, our farm is about 40 minutes north of the Chesapeake Bay, which in the United States is a very large watershed that we have been concerned about, and changing our best management practices over decades to improve our farming practices to make sure that the water that flows through our farm and ends up at the Chesapeake Bay has a better quality from generation to generation. That's something we've been concerned about and part of our sustainability story. In 2017, Dwayne and I installed a digester on the farm, and very much like to hear that presentation, that last presentation we heard. She is using her digester for biogas. We use ours for electricity to go back on the grid. And so it captures the methane from the manure from the cows and will convert it to electricity and ends up back on the grid. We're also able to, on our farm, incorporate some food waste into the digester. We can put 45 to 49% of food waste through the digester. It takes it. We get food waste from a local potato chip company. We also get it from a couple different nearby grocery stores, and it's food that they would normally have to put into a landfill, and we're able to take that, grind it up, and use it in the digester to create more methane. We can also use the product that comes out of the digester that is, it's a consistency of peat moss, and we're able to use that and recycle that back through the barn, put it in the stalls for bedding. So, you know, it's all part of, all part of our story. It's certainly, you know, digesters is not something that is economical for every farm, but we have found it valuable on our farms. We know to get to net zero, going back to the net zero initiative we know it's going to take technology, it's going to take science, it's going to take investment. Those are all very, very critical points for us in moving forward. This is not something that economically, as was mentioned earlier by Per, that economically can come back to farmers on farmers' shoulders. This is something we need investment, and we need it to be financially, economically viable for farmers to continue. And we have solutions. As farmers, we have solutions that can contribute to the land, can contribute to leaving this planet a better place. And we, you know, we all strive for that. But again, it goes back to the technology, the science, the investment. And it's also a matter of recognizing the practices that we have in place, whether it's our crops that's sequestering carbon, whether it's no-till farming. You know, we have forest lands, we have streams. There's a lot of ways that we are outside of technology that our farms are already creating that circular environment for carbon, and we know that our farms have solutions. We also know that it's very critical for farmers to have a voice at not just the UN, but to continue these conversations past the Food System Summit, to be able to continue these conversations and make sure that our farmer voice is heard. I think, you know, you talk to any farmer and they care about the environment. We care about our animals. We have a very strong animal care program in the United States, FARM, Farmers Assuring Responsible Management, and that has helped us all become better farmers. So again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the chance to have a voice here in this setting.
Thank you to you all. Let me just try to summarize some of the themes that I've heard, and ironically, there's some of the themes that Per set out for us at the beginnings. But you know, first of all, I think this issue around diversity, looking at diversity of breeds, looking at diversity of feeding systems, diversity of operations has been really critical to what we've heard from each of the farmers who's been speaking here. The other point is, to me, is around innovation. And you know, for me, farmers are the ultimate scientists, right? You are experimenting every single solitary day with what works and what doesn't work. And the links that have been described between the various farms and universities, academia, farmers organizations providing advice and guidance, governments, helping to develop new innovative systems, and as was mentioned, new business operations, and business opportunities as well, and how farmers are managing their businesses. And I think it really does highlight one of the points Marilyn just made about the importance of farmers organizations in helping to play that role of innovation. The other thing I heard very strongly is this link between the global conversation, the global dialogue around metrics and goals, but how that needs to be translated and actually enacted at the national level to guide national strategies, but that those strategies have to be really grounded in the environment, the agroecology, the animal feeding structures that we have. I think we also heard very much some very different approaches to, each of the farmers here are raising different animals in very different geographic contexts. So we've heard very much how those solutions have to be tailored at the ground level. And so that one size fits all is not going to be possible. But to me, what really came out from this, these speakers that we've had today is what great opportunities we have to really address these issues of how we make our livestock systems more sustainable. And frankly, the level of commitment and engagement that you all have, and I'm sure you are representative of farmers across the countries that you're in and around the world who want a better life for themselves, for their farmers, and for their animals. And I think I would just conclude on one final point is that in all of these cases, these solutions need to be commercially viable. Farmers are scientists, but they're also business people. And we need to ensure that we have appropriate investments from government, from private sector, and consumers who understand how important it is to buy better taste or buy improved environmental quality. Because if these systems aren't commercially viable, none of these conversations are going to make any sense at all. So I don't know, Per, if we have time. We're probably out of time for questions. I think what we'll do is the questions will be directed to the World Farmers Organization, and either WFO will answer them or relay them to the appropriate farmer for further elaboration. And I do think you've put in the chat now the names of the panelists. So if people want to do further research, they can do that. But thank you so much. Really appreciate this and appreciate the audience sticking with us. I know it's late in the day if you're sitting in Rome. And Teo, so wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us. And we all sent you great wishes. We hope you're going to feel better. So, all right. With that, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anne, for leading us through the session. It's fantastic. You did a wonderful job at guiding us through this here. I'm a very happy resident of Switzerland, and so if we were not meeting virtually, I would hand over a big bar of Swiss chocolate to you. And the same I would do to all of our speakers. So at some point when we do meet in person, hopefully, Justin and Cherie and Annechien and Marilyn, you will receive a big bar of Swiss chocolate that I can highly recommend. Thank you very much for sharing your stories with us. We as scientists, we're only here to document what you are pioneering in the field. We depend on you to tell your stories, and I'm so grateful on behalf of the World Farmers Organization that you were willing to give this time from your very busy schedule. And again, Anne, thank you for leading us through this event here. So in that spirit and in the hope of being able to distribute my Swiss chocolate at the right time, I'll see you again, and keep working. We have a tough job ahead of us, but it's worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.